A dying leopard dragged herself to the village, and her blood trail led to something shocking. Imagine the terror an exotic predator, bleeding, collapsing in the middle of the road. The villagers think she's a threat, but when the vet looks closer, he sees something no one expected. The wounds aren't from nature, they're man-made. Bullets, scars, evidence of something far darker hiding in plain sight. Saving her could mean saving the truth, but it also means going against power, money, and people who will kill to keep their secrets buried. Why did this leopard risk everything to crawl into the open? And what horrifying truth does her blood trail expose? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The moon hung low over the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across the empty streets of Pine Valley. It was the kind of quiet night where even the crickets seemed to whisper their songs. Then, breaking through the stillness, came the sound that would change everything, the scrape of claws against asphalt and labored breathing that didn't belong to any local wildlife. Martha Chen, closing up her small grocery store, was the first to see it. The leopard emerged from the darkness like a ghost, its spotted coat gleaming dully under the streetlights. Blood matted its fur, leaving a dark trail behind it. Martha's scream pierced the night air, bringing others running from their homes. "Someone call animal control," shouted Tom Baker from his porch, keeping his distance as the big cat stumbled into the circle of light cast by the street lamp. The leopard's legs gave out as she collapsed in the middle of the road, her sides heaving with each painful breath. Word spread quickly in their small town. Within minutes, a crowd gathered at a safe distance, murmuring in fear and confusion. How had a leopard ended up in rural Montana? Someone had already called Dr. Elias Crane, the local veterinarian. Known for his steady hands and calm demeanor, Elias arrived in his old pickup truck, medical bag in hand. He approached slowly, studying the situation. The leopard lay still now, only her shallow breathing showing she was alive. Despite the villagers' protests, he moved closer. "Stay back, Doc," warned Sheriff Mills. "We should put it down before it hurts someone." But Elias saw something in the leopard's eyes that made him pause. Not aggression, but pain and exhaustion. He knelt beside her, noting the bullet wounds in her shoulder and hip, the way her ribs showed through her coat. This wasn't a wild animal. Someone had done this to her. "She's not a threat," Elias said firmly, opening his medical bag. "She's dying. And she didn't get these wounds by accident." The blood trail stretched back into the darkness like an accusatory finger, pointing toward the wilderness beyond town. Elias followed it with his eyes, knowing that somewhere out there lay answers to this mystery. "We can't just let a dangerous animal live in our midst." Someone called from the crowd, but Elias remained steady, his weathered hands already checking the leopard's vital signs. "She found us," he said quietly, more to himself than the onlookers. "She came here for help." The big cat's eyes met his, and in that moment, Elias made his choice. He would not let fear guide his actions, not when a life hung in the balance. "Here, girl," Elias whispered, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he examined the fallen leopard. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and despite her injuries, she made no aggressive moves. The crowd of villagers pressed closer, there, fear palpable in the night air. As Elias ran practiced hands over her body, his stomach tightened. These weren't the random injuries of an animal that had been in a fight or accident. He found 3 distinct bullet wounds, one in her shoulder, another in her hip, and a graze along her side. The wounds were precise, deliberate. "These are gunshot wounds," he announced, his voice tight with anger. "Someone shot her. Multiple times." The revelation sent a ripple through the watching crowd. The leopard wasn't sick or naturally injured. She was a victim. Using his portable light, Elias examined the wounds more closely. They weren't fresh, maybe a day or two old. The fact that she had survived this long, dragging herself who knew how many miles, spoke to her incredible will to live. "We need to get her stabilized," he said, reaching for his medical bag. "She's lost a lot of blood, but with proper care." The rumble of an approaching vehicle cut him off. A black pickup truck pulled up, its headlights sweeping across the scene. Randall Coyle stepped out, his polished boots crunching on the asphalt. The wealthy rancher's presence seemed to fill the street as he strode forward, his expensive belt buckle catching the streetlight. "What's all this about?" Coyle demanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. When he saw the Leopard, his expression hardened. "A big cat? Here? That's a public safety threat that needs to be put down immediately." Elias straightened up, positioning himself between Coyle and the injured animal. "She's been shot, Randall, multiple times. This wasn't an accident." "All the more reason to end it now," Coyle insisted, his voice growing harder. "That animal is dangerous. We can't risk having it around our families." But Elias couldn't ignore the Leopard's labored breathing, the way she lay there, making no attempt to fight or flee. His veterinarian's oath and his conscience wouldn't let him abandon her. "She needs medical care, not execution. I'm not putting down an animal that's done nothing wrong." The tension between the two men crackled in the air. Coyle's intensity seemed out of proportion to the situation, his insistence on destroying the keels. Leopard almost desperate. But Elias stood his ground, already preparing to administer first aid to his unusual patient. "I'll take full responsibility for her," Elias said firmly, turning back to his medical bag. "She deserves a chance to live." "Here, girl," Elias whispered, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he examined the fallen Leopard. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and despite her injuries, she made no aggressive moves. The crowd of villagers pressed closer, their fear palpable in the cold Montana night air dot as Elias ran practiced hands over her body. His stomach tightened. These weren't the random injuries of an animal that had been in a fight or accident. He found 3 distinct bullet wounds, one in her shoulder, another in her hip, and a graze along her side. The wounds were precise, deliberate, and professionally placed. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. "These are gunshot wounds," he announced, his voice tight with anger. Someone shot her, multiple times. The revelation sent a ripple through the watching crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire among the villagers. The Leopard wasn't sick or naturally injured. She was a victim. Using his portable light, Elias examined the wounds more closely. They weren't fresh, maybe a day or two old. The fact that she had survived this long, dragging herself who knew how many miles, spoke to her incredible will to live. Her golden fur was matted with dried blood, but her eyes remained alert, watching him with an intelligence that made his heart ache. "We need to get her stabilized," he said, reaching for his medical bag. "She's lost a lot of blood, but with proper care." The rumble of an approaching vehicle cut him off. A black pickup truck pulled up, its headlights sweeping across the scene. Randall Coyle stepped out, his polished boots crunching on the asphalt. The wealthy rancher's presence seemed to fill the street as he strode forward, his expensive belt buckle catching the streetlight. "What's all this about?" Coyle demanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. When he saw the Leopard, his expression hardened. "A big cat? Here? That's a public safety threat that needs to be put down immediately." Elias straightened up, positioning himself between Coyle and the injured animal. "She's been shot, Randall, multiple times. This wasn't an accident." "All the more reason to end it now," Coyle insisted, his voice growing harder. His hand rested near his hip, where Elias knew he carried a pistol. "That animal is dangerous. We can't risk having it around our families, our livestock." "But, Elias..." couldn't ignore the leopard's labored breathing, the way she lay there, making no attempt to fight or flee. Her trust in him was evident, even through her pain. His veterinarian's oath and his conscience wouldn't let him abandon her. She needs medical care, not execution. I'm not putting down an animal that's done nothing wrong. The tension between the two men crackled in the air. Coyle's intensity seemed out of proportion to the situation, his insistence on destroying the leopard almost desperate. Something about his behavior struck Elias as odd, but he pushed the thought aside, focusing on his patient's immediate needs. I'll take full responsibility for her, Elias said firmly, turning back to his medical bag. She deserves a chance to live. He began pulling out supplies, making it clear that the discussion was over, even as the leopard's eyes remained fixed on him, filled with a mixture of pain and hope. The fluorescent lights hummed in the makeshift surgery room as Elias and Marjorie worked methodically over the sedated leopard. Her breathing was steady now, thanks to the emergency treatment they provided, but questions about her origins nagged at them both. "Look at these old scars," Marjorie said softly, parting the fur along the leopard's flank. "They're systematic, like she was in some kind of fights." Elias ran the scanner slowly across the leopard's shoulder blades. The device beeped and his heart jumped. "Got something. There's a microchip." Marjorie leaned in closer, her eyes widening. "A microchip? Out here in the middle of nowhere?" The scanner displayed a string of numbers. Elias jotted them down quickly, his hands shaking slightly. "This could tell us where she came from. Every chip has a registry." While Marjorie monitored the leopard's vital signs, Elias entered the numbers into his computer. The search revealed something disturbing. The chip was registered to a private wildlife facility that had been under investigation for suspected trafficking. "My God," he whispered, scrolling through the report. "She's not just some escaped exotic pet. This facility, they've been accused of smuggling endangered species." Heavy boots echoed in the hallway outside. Randall Coyle's imposing figure filled the doorway, his face dark with barely contained anger. "Dr. Crane, a word." Elias stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Coyle moved uncomfortably close, his voice low and menacing. "You're putting everyone at risk, keeping that animal alive," Coyle growled. "What happens when she wakes up? When she gets hungry? You willing to bet people's lives on your bleeding heart?" "She's evidence, Randall. Evidence of something illegal. Those wounds, that microchip. Evidence?" Coyle's laugh was cold. "Evidence of what? Some poor farmer protecting their livestock? You're seeing conspiracies where there aren't any, Doctor. And you're scaring people, making them nervous." But Elias saw it now. The way Coyle's eyes kept darting to the surgery door, the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't about public safety. The leopard's arrival threatened something bigger, something Coyle was desperate to keep hidden. "I'm keeping her alive," Elias said firmly. "And I'm finding out where she came from." Coyle's face hardened. "You're making a mistake, Crane. A big one." He turned and strode away, leaving the threat hanging in the air dot back inside. Marjorie looked up anxiously. "What was that about?" "Confirmation," Elias said grimly, looking at the sleeping leopard. "Whatever happened to her, Coyle's involved, and he's terrified she'll lead us to the truth." As morning light filtered through the clinic windows, Elias sat at his desk, connecting dots that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The microchip registration, the leopard's injuries, and Coyle's aggressive behavior. It all pointed to something sinister happening right in their community. Marjorie entered with fresh coffee, her face etched with concern. "I've been thinking about those coordinates from the microchip registry. They match up with that old property Coyle bought last year, you know? The one where he supposedly started a private game reserve." Elias nodded slowly, his stomach churning. a game reserve that nobody's ever seen, where he never gives tours or allows visitors. He spread out a local map pointing to a remote area. All that land, those high fences, the private security, it wasn't just for show. Do you think he's keeping exotic animals there? Marjorie's voice dropped to a whisper. Not just keeping them. Elias gestured to the photographs they'd taken of the leopard's old scars. Look at these fighting wounds. The systematic abuse. He's running some kind of illegal operation. Maybe exhibition fights, private hunting events. Things wealthy people would pay big money to participate in. The leopard's presence in their clinic wasn't just an accident. She was living proof of crimes that had been happening right under their noses. Her escape had torn open a veil of secrecy that Coyle had carefully maintained. We have to report this, Marjorie insisted. Call the authorities, the media. Someone needs to know. Elias ran his hands through his hair in frustration. With what? Proof? A wounded leopard and some circumstantial evidence? Coyle's got friends in every office that matters. He's donated to every politician's campaign in this state. Without concrete evidence, it'll be his word against ours. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. Treating the leopard quietly might save her life, but it would allow Coyle's operation to continue harming other animals. Going public could expose the truth, but it could also destroy everything Elias had worked for, and possibly put them all. In danger dot from her recovery kennel, the leopard watched them with alert eyes. Her strength was returning day by day, each small improvement a silent victory. Where there had been defeat in her gaze, Elias now saw a spark of life returning. She had found the courage to escape, to fight for her survival. Perhaps she was showing him the way forward. She didn't just end up here by chance, Elias said quietly. She escaped from Coyle's compound and came to us. Maybe she's giving us a chance to make things right. The truth lay heavy in the room. They weren't just dealing with a wounded animal anymore. They were holding a key to exposing a criminal enterprise, and every passing hour brought them closer to a decision that would change everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the clinic's parking lot when 3 black pickup trucks roared up the gravel driveway. Elias looked up from his paperwork, immediately recognizing the aggressive approach. His heart began to pound as boots hit gravel. At least 6 men, all moving with purpose. Marjorie, he called out, his voice tight with urgency. Get the trailer ready, now. The front door burst open before Marjorie could respond. 2 men in. Dark jackets pushed their way in, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Behind them came Randall Coyle, his face twisted with barely contained rage. Where is she, Crane? Coyle's voice filled the small waiting room. This ends today. Elias stood, slowly, placing himself between the men and the treatment area. This is a medical facility, Mr. Coyle. You can't just barge in here. Like hell I can't. Coyle nodded to his men, who immediately started moving toward the back rooms. That animal is my property, and you're harboring evidence of nothing. Hand her over, and maybe we can forget this whole mess. Through the window, Elias caught sight of Marjorie quietly slipping out the back door. They had discussed this possibility, had a plan for it, but the reality was far more terrifying than their late-night contingency talks. Your property? Elias kept his voice steady, buying time. Funny, I don't recall seeing any permits for keeping exotic animals. Maybe we should call Fish and Wildlife, sort this out properly? Coyle's face darkened. Last chance, Doc. Don't be stupid. A crash from the back room made everyone jump. One of Coyle's men called out, Empty kennels back here, boss. Elias's heart leaped. Marjorie had already moved a leopard. They'd prepared an old horse trailer, lined with blankets, ready for just such an emergency. Now everything depended on timing. Coyle's controlled facade cracked. He grabbed Elias by the shirt collar, slamming him against the wall. Where is she? The sound of an engine turning over came from behind the clinic. Coyle's eyes widened in realization. "Stop that trailer," he shouted, shoving Elias aside as he ran for the door. Elias didn't hesitate. He bolted through the back office, knocking over a chair to slow his pursuers. The late afternoon air hit his face as he burst through the rear exit. Marjorie had the truck in gear, the trailer already hitched. She was half standing on the running board, holding the passenger door open. "Come on!" she screamed. A shot cracked through the air. Elias felt the wind of it pass his ear as he dove for the truck. Another bullet pinged off the trailer's metal side. He pulled himself into the cab as Marjorie floored the accelerator, tires spinning in the gravel before finding purchase. They fishtailed onto the narrow back road as more shots rang out. In the side mirror, Elias saw Coyle's men scrambling for their vehicles. "The old logging roads," he gasped, clutching the dashboard as they took a sharp turn. "They won't know them like we do." Marjorie nodded grimly, handling the truck and trailer with skill born from years of farm work. The Leopard let out a weak cry from the trailer, the sound tearing at Elias's heart. "Is she secure?" he asked, twisting to look through the back window. "Double-latched and padded," Marjorie assured him, "but she's scared." "We all are." The truck bounced hard as they hit a rutted dirt road. Behind them, headlights appeared, gaining ground. Marjorie took them deeper into the forest, following trails that hadn't seen maintenance in years. Low branches scraped the sides of the trailer. "Left here." Elias pointed to a nearly hidden turn. "It connects to the Miller's back 40. The pursuit continued through the gathering dusk. A deadly game of cat and mouse played out across the Montana backroads. Every bump and turn jostled the trailer, bringing another cry from their precious cargo. Elias found himself whispering reassurances, though whether to the Leopard, Marjorie, or himself, he wasn't sure. A fallen tree forced them to swerve suddenly. The trailer wheels lifted on one side before crashing back down. Marjorie's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I never thought it would come to this," she said, voice shaking but determined, "actually running from armed men. What happened to our quiet little town?" "The quiet was an illusion," Elias replied, checking the mirrors again. "Coyle's been running his operation for who knows how long. We just never wanted to see it." They crossed a shallow creek, water spraying up around them. The headlights behind them had fallen back, but they were still there, searching. The Leopard's cries had grown quieter, concerning Elias. "We need to find somewhere safe," he said. "She can't take much more of this, and neither can we." Marjorie took another turn, this one leading up a steep incline. "I know a place. Old hunting cabin my uncle used to use. It's not much, but it's hidden." Another shot rang out, closer this time. It must have gained ground on the straighter stretch. Elias ducked instinctively as something pinged off the truck's tailgate. "They're not just trying to stop us anymore," he said grimly. "They're shooting to kill." The reality of their situation hit him full force. In trying to save one life, they'd put their own at risk. But looking back at the trailer, remembering the Leopard's scars and her incredible will to survive, he knew they had no choice. Some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for even. The truck's engine strained against the steep grade as they climbed higher into the mountains. The pursuit vehicle's headlights grew more distant, their drivers less familiar with these treacherous paths. But Elias knew this wasn't over. Coyle would never stop hunting them now. The Leopard was evidence of his crimes, and they were witnesses dot in the growing darkness. With danger behind them and uncertainty ahead, Elias felt the full weight of his decision. His veterinarian's oath to heal and protect had led him here, far beyond anything he'd imagined when he first knelt beside a wounded leopard in the middle of a village road. Now that same oath demanded more from him, not just to heal, but to fight for justice, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The leopard's quiet whimper from the trailer seemed to echo his thoughts. They were all in this together now, bound by circumstance and choice, racing through the darkness toward whatever fate awaited them. The old hunting cabin creaked in the pre-dawn wind as Elias sorted through the papers spread across a weathered table. His hands trembled as he examined each document, each photograph revealing another layer of horror from Coyle's operation. Marjorie sat across from him, her face pale in the lantern light as she helped organize the evidence they'd gathered. "I can't believe this," Elias whispered, holding up a blood-stained program from what appeared to be some kind of exclusive event. They weren't just keeping these animals captive. They were. His voice broke. The program detailed exhibitions, sanitized language for what amounted to brutal fighting matches between exotic animals. Wealthy spectators paid thousands of dollars to watch the barbaric displays. "Look at these dates," Marjorie said, pointing to a ledger they discovered through careful investigation. "They've been doing this for years, right under our noses." Elias picked up a stack of photographs, each one more disturbing than the last. The images showed various exotic animals in terrible conditions. Tigers, lions, and leopards kept in cramped cages. But it was the fighting ring photos that turned his stomach. A circular arena with high walls, stained dark with old blood. "Our leopard," he said softly, finding a particular image that made his heart clench. She was their champion. The photograph showed their leopard, but not as they knew her now. In the image, she stood fierce and muscular, though her eyes held a wild desperation. Notes in the margins detailed her victories. 15 brutal matches against other big cats, each one forced to fight to survive. She was the only one who survived their last event, Marjorie realized, reading through a hastily written report. Something went wrong. The crowd got too excited, too drunk. They pushed for more violence, and she fought her way out. Actually broke through the arena barrier. Elias remembered the peculiar scarring patterns they'd found on the leopard's body, now understanding their true origin. That's why Coyle was so desperate to find her. She's not just evidence of smuggling. She's proof of something far worse. A series of bank statements revealed the scale of the operation. Hundreds of thousands of dollars changing hands, carefully disguised as livestock transactions. Names of wealthy clients, coded but still traceable. Local officials on Coyle's payroll, explaining why their initial reports had gone nowhere. "We need help," Marjorie said firmly. "This is bigger than us, bigger than local law enforcement. Even if they weren't compromised, they don't have the resources to take down something this large." Elias nodded, reaching for his satellite phone. Their only secure means of communication since they'd gone into hiding. "I have a contact. Someone I met at a veterinary conference last year. She works for the Federal Wildlife Service, investigating trafficking cases." His fingers hesitated over the keypad. "Making this call, there's no going back, Marjorie. Coyle will know we've gone federal. He'll come at us with everything he has." Marjorie looked toward the back room where their leopard patient rested, finally showing signs of real recovery. "We've already passed the point of no return, Elias. The moment we chose to save her life, we chose this path." The phone connected after 3 rings. Agent Sarah Reeves. A crisp voice answered. "This is Dr. Elias Crane from Montana," he said, his voice steadying as he committed to their course. "We've uncovered an illegal wildlife operation, but it's more than just trafficking. They're running some kind of underground fighting ring. We have evidence, documents, photos, financial records." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you safe, Dr. Crane?" "For now. We're in hiding with one of the victims, a leopard who escaped. Their last event. She's living proof of what they've done." "Stay where you are," Agent Reeves instructed. "Don't trust anyone local. I'm putting together a team right now. We can be there in 8 hours. After ending the call, Elias walked to check on their patient. The leopard lifted her head as he entered, her eyes more alert than they'd been since her arrival. In the dim light, her scars told a new story, not just of survival, but of unimaginable cruelty endured. "We're going to make this right," he promised her softly. "Everything you went through, everything they did, it's all coming to light." A distant engine sound made them all freeze. Marjorie quickly doused a lantern while Elias moved to the window, carefully peering out through a gap in the boards. A vehicle was moving slowly along the logging road below, its headlights sweeping through the trees. "Coyle's men," he whispered. "They're still searching." They waited in tense silence as the vehicle passed, its engine sound fading into the distance. But the close call reinforced the danger of their situation. Coyle had too much to lose, millions in illegal profits, wealthy clients who'd paid for his bloody entertainment, corrupt officials who'd looked the other way. 8 hours, Marjorie murmured. "We just have to hold out for 8 hours. Elias looked at their gathered evidence, each piece another nail in Coyle's coffin. The documents revealed a network of corruption and cruelty that went beyond anything they'd imagined when they first chose to help a wounded leopard. The exhibition programs, written expensive gilt lettering, detailed fights scheduled like sophisticated entertainment. Wealthy patrons placed bets on which animal would survive, treating death as a spectator sport. "We need to organize everything," he said, forcing himself to focus. "Agent Reeves will need to understand the full scope quickly." They worked through the early morning hours, arranging the evidence chronologically. The pattern it revealed was clear. Coyle had started with simple wildlife smuggling, bringing in exotic animals for private collectors. But greed and sadism had led him to create something far darker. The fighting ring had begun 3 years ago, each event becoming more violent than the last. The leopard's story emerged through the records. She'd been captured in Asia, shipped in a container marked as farm equipment. Unlike the other animals, she'd shown an unusual combination of ferocity and cunning in the ring. Rather than breaking under the brutality, she'd learned, adapted, survived. Until that final night when the crowd's bloodlust had pushed things too far. "Listen to this," Marjorie said, reading from a handwritten note. "Subject shows unprecedented tactical thinking, recommending increased security measures. She's learning to use the arena barriers to her advantage." Elias felt a mix of pride and sorrow. She wasn't just fighting. She was studying them, learning their weaknesses. When the moment came, she knew exactly where to break through. A sudden scratching sound made them both jump, but it was just the leopard, trying to get more comfortable on her bed of blankets. Her breathing had improved significantly over the past days, and her wounds were healing clean. She was proving as resilient in recovery as she had been in captivity. More vehicles passed on the road below, closer this time. Coyle was expanding his search pattern, growing desperate as dawn approached. Each passing hour increased the risk of discovery, but also brought them closer to rescue. "What do you think will happen?" Marjorie asked quietly. "Even with federal agents, Coyle has so much influence here." Elias studied the financial records again. That influence is built on money and fear. Once this evidence goes public, once people see what he's really been doing, his supporters will scatter. No one will want to be connected to this kind of cruelty. He picked up one last photograph, a wide shot of Coyle's compound taken from a distance. Behind the legitimate ranch buildings, hidden structures were just visible. The fighting arena, the holding pens, all disguised as agricultural facilities. Years of violence and exploitation hidden behind a respectable facade. "We didn't just save her life," Elias realized, looking at their leopard patient. "She saved U.S. She showed us the truth about what was happening in our own community. How many people suspected something but looked the other way? How many chose comfort over courage? Marjorie reached over and squeezed his hand. We're choosing differently. Whatever comes next, we're choosing to stand for something right. The Leopard's quiet presence filled the cabin as they continued their work, her survival a testament to the strength of life in the face of humanity's darkest impulses. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the boarded windows, Elias felt the weight of their discovery settling into his bones. The evidence before them revealed not just crimes against animals, but crimes against the very notion of compassion and dignity. The sound of distant helicopters echoed through the mountains. Help was coming. The truth would soon be exposed. But the real fight, the fight to restore justice and heal the wounds inflicted by greed and cruelty, was just beginning. The night air carried a bitter chill, but Elias couldn't rest. Every sound outside their hiding place made him tense, expecting Coyle's men to find them at any moment. The Leopard dozed fitfully on her makeshift bed, occasionally lifting her head at distant noises. Her golden eyes reflected what little moonlight filtered through the barn's weatherboards. Marjorie had finally fallen asleep in the corner, wrapped in an old horse blanket. The past 48 hours had pushed them all to their limits, but she'd never wavered in her support. The evidence they'd gathered was safely hidden, ready for the federal agent's arrival in the morning. A strange smell caught Elias's attention. Something acrid and wrong. Then he saw it, wisps of smoke curling through the gaps in the wooden walls. His heart stopped. "Fire!" he shouted, already moving. "Marjorie, wake up!" She jerked awake as orange light began to flicker outside. The smoke thickened rapidly, and now they could hear the hungry roar of flames. Coyle's men had found them and chosen the most devastating way to flush them out. "The back door," Elias commanded, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Get the evidence and get out. I'll get the Leopard." The barn's ancient wood was perfect kindling. Fire spread across the roof with frightening speed, dropping burning debris onto the hay-strewn floor. The Leopard was fully awake now, eyes wide, with terror. Her previous wounds made her too weak to run on her own. Marjorie grabbed their documented evidence and sprinted for the rear exit. Elias reached the Leopard just as a burning beam crashed down behind him, blocking their escape route. The main doors were already engulfed in flames. "Come on, girl," he urged, trying to coax her onto the blanket so he could drag her. "We're not giving up now." The smoke was getting thicker, making his eyes water and his lungs burn. The Leopard resisted at first, paralyzed by fear, but something in his voice seemed to reach her. She allowed him to guide her onto the blanket. The heat was becoming unbearable. Elias could hear the roof timbers groaning overhead as the fire weakened their structure. He began pulling the blanket with the Leopard toward the only remaining exit, a narrow side door that was already starting to smoke. His chest felt like it was being crushed as he struggled to breathe through the dense smoke. The Leopard was coughing too, a harsh sound that tore at his heart. They were running out of time. "Almost there," he wheezed, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring the Leopard or himself. The side door was only 15 feet away, but it felt like miles. A thunderous crack split the air. Elias looked up to see the roof starting to cave in. Without thinking, he threw himself over the Leopard as burning debris rained down around them. Pain lanced across his back where embers struck. But he kept moving, kept pulling. "Elias!" Marjorie's voice cut through the roar of the flames. She had fought her way back to the side door and was reaching through the smoke. With one final surge of desperate strength, Elias dragged the blanket the last few feet. Marjorie grabbed the other end, and together they pulled the Leopard clear of the building. They stumbled away from the barn just as the entire structure collapsed in a shower of sparks and flame. The cold night air felt like knives in Elias's smoke-scorched lungs as he doubled over, coughing violently. His back was burned, his clothes were singed, but he was alive. More importantly, the Leopard was alive. Though clearly distressed by the smoke and chaos, Marjorie's hands were gentle as she helped him sit up. "You could have died in there," she sobbed, her voice shaking. "What were you thinking?" Ilias looked at the Leopard, who was watching him with an intensity he'd never seen before. "I was thinking that we made her a promise," he said hoarsely, "that we wouldn't let anyone hurt her again." The burning barn cast an orange glow across the landscape, illuminating several vehicles fleeing the scene. Coyle's men, no doubt, assuming. Their work was done. They hadn't counted on Elias's determination or the depth of his commitment to protecting his patient. "The evidence?" he asked, suddenly remembering their other precious cargo. Marjorie patted her jacket. "Safe. They didn't get what they came for." The Leopard dragged herself closer to Elias, pressing against his leg in an unprecedented display of trust. Despite everything she'd been through, despite her natural fear of humans and fire, she had recognized his sacrifice. Her trust felt like both a gift and a responsibility. "We need to move," Marjorie said, helping Elias to his feet. "They'll be back when they realize we survived." Elias nodded, wincing at the movement. "The old Miller place. It's abandoned, but the root cellar is still solid. We can hide there until morning." As they helped the Leopard into their truck, Elias took one last look at the burning ruins of the barn. Coyle had meant this fire to destroy them, to erase the evidence of his crimes. Instead, he'd only strengthened their resolve. This wasn't just about doing the right thing anymore. This was personal. The Leopard settled in the back of the truck, her eyes reflecting the flames. She'd survived fire before, Elias realized. The scars on her body told stories of other burns, other attempts to break her spirit. Like her, they would emerge from this stronger, more determined. Marjorie started the engine as Elias gingerly settled into the passenger seat. His burns needed treatment, but they would have to wait. What mattered now was staying ahead of Coyle until help arrived. "You know what this means," Marjorie said as they pulled away from the inferno. "Coyle's desperate enough to commit arson. He'll stop at nothing to silence us." "Then we'll stop at nothing to expose him," Elias replied, his voice rough but determined. "The Leopard didn't give up. Neither will we." They drove into the darkness, leaving the burning barn behind. The fire had changed something fundamental in their struggle. What had started as an act of compassion for a wounded animal had become a fight for justice, for truth, for the very principles that defined who they were. And like the Leopard, they would face whatever came next with courage and resilience. The night wasn't over yet, but dawn was coming. Until then, they would protect each other, guard their evidence, and keep faith with the remarkable creature who had brought them into this fight. The burn of smoke in Elias's lungs reminded him with every breath what was at stake, and what he was willing to risk to see justice done. The old Miller property provided little shelter beyond its sturdy root cellar, but it had kept them safe through the night. As dawn broke over the Montana hills, Elias emerged from their hiding place, his burns still stinging beneath the makeshift bandages Marjorie had applied. The Leopard followed, moving slowly but steadily, her recovery a testament to her will to live. The morning air was crisp and clear, carrying the lingering scent of smoke from the destroyed barn miles away. Elias surveyed the quiet landscape, hoping their message had reached the federal investigator in time. They couldn't keep running forever. "Movement on the road," Marjorie called softly from her lookout position. 3 vehicles, coming fast. Elias's heart sank as he recognized the lead truck, Coyle's personal vehicle, a black Ford F350 that seemed to absorb the morning light. Behind it, 2 more trucks carried what appeared to be at least 6 men. "Get the evidence ready," Elias told Marjorie, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "If anything happens, you need to get it to the authorities. The leopard pressed against his leg, a low growl rumbling in her chest. She sensed the approaching danger, but instead of fleeing, she stood her ground beside him. Her loyalty touched something deep in Elias's soul. The trucks roared onto the property, kicking up clouds of dust as they circled to block any escape route. Coyle emerged first, his expensive boots crunching on gravel. The rancher's face was twisted with rage, and the rifle in his hands left no doubt about his intentions. "You've caused me quite enough trouble, Crane," Coyle called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Time to end this foolishness." Elias stood his ground, positioning himself between Coyle and the leopard. "It's over, Randall. The authorities know everything. Do they?" Coyle's laugh was cold. "All they have is the word of a country vet who's lost his mind over some dangerous animal." "Who do you think they'll believe? The respected rancher who employs half the county, or the fool who's been harboring a man-eater?" The other men spread out, weapons ready. Elias recognized some of them. Ranch hands he'd treated animals for, men who'd smiled and joked with him not long ago. Now they wouldn't meet his eyes. "She's not just some animal," Elias said, his voice rising with conviction. "She's evidence of every crime you've committed. The microchip proves where she came from. The scars tell the story of what you did to her. You can't hide the truth anymore." Coyle's face darkened. "Truth? The truth is that some people understand power, and some people need to be taught about it." He raised his rifle. "Last chance, Crane. Step aside." The leopard's growl grew louder, but she held her position. Marjorie had disappeared into the root cellar, hopefully making her way to the hidden back exit with the evidence. Elias prayed she'd make it in time. "You're going to have to shoot me first," Elias said quietly, "and then you'll have to explain my death along with everything else." "So be it." Coyle's finger tightened on the trigger. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the tension. Multiple engines, growing louder by the second. Coyle's men shifted nervously, looking to their boss for direction. 3 black SUVs crested the hill, federal markings clearly visible on their sides. They moved with precision, cutting off any escape routes. Armed agents emerged, weapons drawn. Federal agents. "Lower your weapons." The commanding voice belonged to a tall woman in a tactical vest who moved with practiced authority. "Randall. Coyle, you're under arrest." Coyle's face went from rage to calculated charm in an instant. There must be some mistake. "I'm here to help contain a dangerous animal that—" "Save it," the agent cut him off. "We have your financial records, witness statements, and surveillance footage from your compound. Agent Sarah Conway, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We've been building a case against your operation for months. Dr. Crane's evidence was the final piece we needed." Elias felt weak with relief as the agents moved in, disarming Coyle's men. The leopard remained beside him, watching the proceedings with intense focus. "You can't prove anything?" Coyle snarled, but his composure was cracking. "I have friends in the state government. We know. They're being arrested as we speak." Conway approached the leopard with professional interest. "She's the one who escaped during the last exhibition fight, isn't she? The champion who wouldn't die." Coyle's silence was admission enough. As agents secured his wrists with handcuffs, his carefully constructed world of power and influence crumbled around him. Marjorie emerged from hiding, clutching their documented evidence. "I got through to them just in time," she told Elias, watching as Coyle was led away. "The fire last night convinced them to move up the raid." Agent Conway approached them, her expression softening. "Dr. Crane, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Your courage in protecting her gave us the time we needed to complete our investigation." Coyle's operation wasn't just about smuggling. It was about illegal gambling, money laundering, and animal cruelty on an industrial scale. The leopard watched as Coyle was placed in one of the SUVs, her tail twitching slightly. In her eyes, Elias saw not triumph, but a quiet dignity, the look of a survivor who had outlasted her tormentor. "What will happen to her now?" Elias asked, his hand resting gently on the leopard's back. "There's a wildlife sanctuary in Montana that specializes in rehabilitating big cats," Conway replied. "They've already agreed to take her. She have space, care, and most importantly, peace." As the agents began documenting the scene and taking statements, Elias knelt beside the leopard. She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with that same intense trust she'd shown during their desperate flight from the fire. "You did it," he told her softly. "You survived." You brought him down. The leopard pressed her head against his hand, a gesture of connection that moved him deeply. She had been worth every risk, every moment of fear, every burn and bruise. In saving her, he had rediscovered something essential about himself, the courage to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. Coyle's vehicle pulled away, followed by the others containing his arrested men. The rancher's empire of cruelty had fallen, brought down by the very creature he had tried to destroy. The morning sun rose higher, warming the air, promising a new day in justice long overdue. The leopard settled beside Elias, watching the vehicles disappear into the distance. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed for the first time since she dragged herself into his life on that impossible night. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was finally truly free. 2 weeks after Coyle's arrest, Elias stood at the edge of a vast enclosure at the Montana Wildlife Sanctuary. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wild grass. Behind the sturdy but unobtrusive fencing, natural habitat stretched for acres, a carefully designed space that mimicked the leopard's ancestral home. "She's ready," the sanctuary director, Dr. Sarah Miller, said softly. "Her physical recovery has been remarkable. The latest tests show she's strong enough for the transition." Elias nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He watched as the transport carrier was positioned at the enclosure's entrance. Inside, he could hear the leopard's steady breathing. She was calm now, so different from the desperate creature who had collapsed in the village street that night. Marjorie stood beside him, her presence steady and supportive, as always. "You did this," she whispered. "You gave her this chance." The carrier door opened slowly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with deliberate grace, the leopard emerged. Her coat gleamed in the morning light, the old scars now faded beneath. Healthy fur. She moved with fluid strength, her previously injured leg showing barely a trace of weakness. Elias held his breath as she paused, surveying her new domain. The transformation from that first night was stunning. Gone was the desperate, bleeding creature fighting for survival. In her place stood a magnificent wild being, restored to dignity and strength. The leopard took her first steps into the enclosure. Her movements were cautious but confident, each paw print marking a new beginning. She investigated a fallen log, scented the air, and moved deeper into the space designed to give her the freedom she had fought so hard to win. "Look at her stride," Dr. Miller observed professionally. "You'd hardly know she was ever injured. The physical therapy protocols you developed were exactly what she needed." But Elias barely heard the praise. He was lost in remembering the night of the fire, the desperate flight from Coyle's men, the endless hours of careful treatment. Every moment had led to this one. Watching her walk free, the leopard paused atop a rocky outcropping, her powerful form silhouetted against the morning sky. She turned to look back at them, and Elias felt the same connection that had formed that first night when he knelt beside her broken body and promised to help. "She remembers you," Marjorie said softly, squeezing his arm. "The sanctuary will keep her safe," Dr. Miller assured them. "We have round-the-clock security, and the legal team is making sure Coyle's assets are seized to fund her ongoing care. She'll never be hurt again. Elias nodded, grateful. The federal investigation had revealed the full scope of Coyle's operation. Dozens of animals forced into brutal fights. Wealthy spectators betting millions. A network of corruption that had seemed untouchable. But it had all crumbled, brought down by one leopard's will to survive and one veterinarian's refusal to look away. The leopard descended from her perch, moving deeper into the enclosure. She found a sun-warmed patch of grass and settled there, stretching out with languid ease. It was such a natural gesture, so free of fear or pain, that Elias felt tears prick at his eyes. "You know," Marjorie said, "when you first insisted on treating her, I thought you were crazy. Taking on Coyle, risking everything. It seemed impossible." "It was the only choice," Elias replied simply. "Sometimes healing means standing up to the thing that caused the harm." They watched as the leopard dozed in the sunlight, her sides rising and falling with peaceful breaths. The sight stirred something deep in Elias's heart. His own wounds, the disillusionment, the compromises, the slow dulling of purpose that had crept into his practice, were healing too. Dr. Miller excused herself to attend to other duties, leaving Elias and Marjorie at the observation point. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their patient enjoy her hard-won freedom. "The clinic rebuilding starts next week," Marjorie mentioned after a while. "The insurance came through, and the community donations have been incredible. People want to help, now that the truth is known." Elias smiled. The fire had destroyed his barn, but it hadn't destroyed his resolve. If anything, rising from those ashes had made him stronger, more certain of his path. "We'll build it better," he said. "Larger treatment areas, better security, maybe even a small rehabilitation space for local wildlife." "Always thinking ahead," Marjorie chuckled. "That's the Elias I remember from when I first started working for you, before all the politics and compromises wore you down." He nodded, understanding what she meant. Somewhere along the way, he had started accepting the status quo, turning a blind eye to things he should have questioned. The leopard had changed that, awakening his old certainty about right and wrong. The sun climbed higher, warming the morning air. The leopard rolled onto her side, completely at ease in her new home. Her recovery was more than physical. She had reclaimed her essential nature, her right to exist as she was meant to be. "We should go," Marjorie said gently. Let her settle in without an audience. Elias took one last look at his patient. The leopard's eyes met his, and in that gaze he saw everything that made his choice worthwhile. She was alive, she was free, and she would thrive. Sometimes that was all the medicine needed to do. Create the conditions for healing and then step back, trusting in the strength of life itself. As they walked back to the car, Elias felt lighter than he had in years. The leopard's journey from victim to survivor had restored something vital in him, his belief in the power of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. In saving her, he had saved himself. The Montana mountains rose around them, wild and beautiful. Somewhere behind them, a leopard dozed in the sun, her battles finally over. And in a small town below, a veterinary clinic waited to be rebuilt, its purpose renewed by the courage of one amazing animal and the people who had fought to give her a chance at freedom. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.